Okay, so one of the things we discussed was that part of this weekend is about the succession plan. Who do the legacy group pass on, came to believe to? Because that doesn't happen overnight, and if we don't begin to wrestle with the questions, there are apparently going to be a problem here. If we don't begin to wrestle with some of this, there'll come a time, and all of a sudden, what do we do? So this weekend, a big part of that was, how do we pass this on? Okay? And so over the last 3-4 months, we have, myself and a lot of the people in this group, have spent a whole lot of time discussing this. And I had the privilege of becoming friends with several of these people, getting to talk with them, and really getting to where I value the time we spend together. For me, this was the most exciting session because it's a chance for you guys to see their hearts, to really see what their thoughts are about passing this down. So what we're going to do is, I've got some questions, and we, as a group, created these questions. But what these questions are, for you guys, just keep in mind, these questions are just starters for you. You go with them wherever you want, and I'll follow along and try and challenge you maybe with some things that'll help the audience. So, one of the first questions I want to ask you is, what are the challenges that you're facing in trying to pass on came to believe? Anyone?
Finding qualified personnel, recognizing the talents of people who are equipped physically, mentally, spiritually to move into a position of succession. We have some in mind, and they may know or may not know who they are, and that it's a moving target, for lack of a better way of describing it, because as soon as you maybe think you got somebody recognized, then fear or just job or whatever, they move. So it's just a matter of finding the right person with the right clothes, the right shoes, and so forth to fit into. And it's a very difficult position to be in, because as many of you know or don't know, there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of work that goes into this thing. It's a team effort, and I don't think there's any doubt if I die, Sue dies, any of us dies, the message will go on. But it would be so nice if we found earlier on, some people that we could train up effectively.
Anyone else? There's no order or anything.
This is Jack Rapp, and I'm still a grateful recovered alcoholic. I agree with everything Steve has said, no question about it. From my standpoint, the toughest job of all is to find somebody who will own came to believe the way we own came to believe. This is such a very, very important thing in our lives. And we can't sell you this. It's something that God has to put in your heart, and as He's done us. Now, that to me is the real challenge. Where does this person, how do we identify, wow, what a challenge that is. So we really have to be in prayer about this, big time. It's really no different than finding somebody to shepherd a new retreat. It's the same responsibility, but it takes the same kind of dedication and enthusiasm and buying and owning came to believe.
I think it's a dichotomy of wanting to own it and give it away at the same time. And the success Clarence had was that he died a couple hours later. So he wasn't here to stand back and critique, and it was the difference for us of riding around the back seat watching him work, and then suddenly you're in the driver's seat and you just do it. So the dichotomy is the first thing. I think we have never been intentional about it because of that. We may see people who have great ability, and why are we wasting them, having them follow around behind us? If they would just move to Texas and start their own, that would be great. But we don't want them to do that because it makes our life easier to have them close by. So we're in this you called it attention. It's absolutely attention. We can't see the potential because they've never been in the driver's seat. We got thrown in the driver's seat, so it was kind of a lucky catch. From my own personal, what would I pass on? It's kind of a little background thing. I think a lot of people can do that. Just for the web, how would you pass that on? That whole, well, I haven't found
That's our
anybody who
fourth
wants to
question.
do that. So I'm hoping, I have never quite been as intentional about finding somebody since it was rocking along fine. Suzanne is going to go to Drupal camp with me in April. Anybody else wants to know how to do webs at Drupal camp? Okay. But why didn't I ask until now? Because of John Metcalf bringing this whole question up, and we've just made a decision to get intentional. But I think it's also, we have to make sure that in order to multiply, the seed has to hit the ground, grow up again, and create its own seeds. And I think we're not trusting the fact that we have to die before we, figuratively, we have got to just hit the ground and look like we're dead and let someone else grow up, and we're not quite ready to do that. So I think it's not so much a lack of talent there as it is a lack of wanting to give it up completely here.
BJ, did you want to say something? Or?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm still Liz. I'm still a recovered alcoholic. And I know that I am supposed to be working at Came to Believe retreats because the Lord called me. The Lord called me. And I tell that in my story. I'm going to tell the story now, it takes too long, but on a Friday night in the fall of 1972, I was drinking and having crab cakes in Maryland, and I was taking a lady home, my friend home. We were both high, we were both alcoholics. She died a couple of months later, and I was going down the drain fast, and I was helping her to bed, and the Lord spoke to me in a loud voice, and He said, "There, but for the grace of God are you." And this is when I started living again. And after that, I went out into the rose garden. It scared me so bad. And He kept telling me that He had good things for me and to do this and that. So I am the called. Romans 8:28 says this, that for we know that all things work together for good, for those who love God and for those who are the called according to His promises. So I personally believe that you are called to do different things. Now I do the Dalta. I do two things in the Came to Believe retreat. I'm called to do other things, but mainly I do the Wino Willie talk, and on Saturday afternoon I do How to Live Like a King's Kid. Sometimes I call it boot camp, depending upon what the Lord wants that weekend. But so the Lord started talking to me. How many years ago, BJ?
Oh, since what, 80s?
Not that long. I think it's been about 5 or 6 years. 5 or 6 years. And I went to Him and I said, who's going to inherit Wino Willie? And I was only 82 then. And I have some years to go, incidentally.
Right, I'm pushing.
So don't count me out, kids. Anyway, so I said, who's going to inherit Wino Willie? And I let it go like I always do. I ask the Lord, and then I give it to him, and then I take my hands off of it and I forget it. And time marched on, I don't know how long, and BJ Rapp. And I thought, oh, wow. So I waited a while to tell her. And then one retreat, I came up to her and I said, I have something to tell you. And we had a conversation, and I said, the Lord showed me that you are to inherit Wino Willie. And she said, the Lord said the same thing to me. So you, as I'm looking at you out there, are the called, or you wouldn't be here. God has worked in your heart and in your life and in your being to come to this retreat. And you may be new, that's all right. I was new, I didn't know anything. I was 40, almost 50 years old when I came. And I was extremely immature. Now you know there are two kinds of maturity. There's body maturity, where you're 50 years old. And then there's emotional maturity, where you're about either 5, 6, or 7, and sometimes people are 12 years old, emotionally speaking, when they sober up. And so I'm not putting anything on anybody, but you can't do drugs and alcohol at the same time I was doing medicine and alcohol and have any kind of maturity whatsoever. So we grow in maturity when we sober up. And now I'm thinking about my Live Like a King's Kid workshop, and the Lord hasn't answered me on that.
BJ?
Good evening, or afternoon, family. I'm still BJ Rapp and recovered from you. And that was no easy task. You know, I see things a little differently. When I came to believe, I first felt that it truly was a family environment. There was no AA and others. There was no AA, Al-Anon, clear division. And this has always been promoted for healing and recovery for all of us. And I thought that was unique. Now I know it's God divine. That we would, if we got sick together, we can get well together. And this environment has given me that opportunity to be a real jerk, to be the old BJ. And the people that were here and are here, and many of you are here now, that showed me great love and tolerance. Isn't that the code of the AA program? You lived out the came to believe. We're talking about the succession of retreats. I am especially excited to see the changed lives where we live came to believe every day. I have no worries about it succeeding. This is God's plan. We are first century Christians. We are the old time AA. So instead of have to, we get to receive this and pass it on. And I'm so thankful to be a part of that. And especially now in this summit, I have such great hope, and I'm so excited about how this is not just going to increase, but multiply. Thank you.
Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol Morfitt Welch, grateful recovered Al-Anon and human being, and I guess I recovered from you too. I just see a beautiful spirit in the succession of the Came to Believe retreats. And it started with my knowledge of it, and where I started in it was when Dale Morfitt went down to Florida and heard people explain God to him as they truly understood him. And he came back to Amory on fire, and he would have done anything. He tried to figure out a way to get a bus to bring the Amory people down here so they could get what he got. And in turn, Clarence and Grace came up and helped us start a retreat there. Okay. And so now several other retreats blossomed out and branched out from there. And I guess the biggest thing in my mind is how Jean has blossomed out from there and carrying on. And John Metcalf, and the two of them, they go forth and grow and foster growth in other people. And I see the other people in whom they're fostering growth. And it gives me a lot of hope about what can happen with the succession of the Came to Believe retreats. And I think this summit, a place of drawing together where it can be communicated between groups, is just wonderful. Thank you.
So we have obviously two couples here now, and Carol was involved with her husband for a long time. Could you guys speak a little bit to what it's been like for your marriages to be involved in this together over all these years, and maybe some of the challenges? I know this wasn't one of our questions, but I think I think that, you know, as we look out here today, there are a lot of married people, there are a lot of couples, and there is experience, strength, and hope in what you guys have figured out. You may have had tensions within your marriage because of this, but you're still married, and you're still at it together in spite of all of that. And if you could just maybe reflect on that a little bit for us.
Thank you, and I will take the lead on this one. For those that had not met Clarence, he was tall and thin and a gruff old man. He had no time for nonsense, and he pointed the finger, and he pretty much just laid down the law. And just the opposite end of the spectrum was a wife named Grace. And she was, well, her name said it all. She was full of grace, mercy, and unconditional love. And they both came together not only for a retreat, but throughout their marriage, the everyday stuff that goes on. And I saw, and let me digress for a second. I want you to know that I came to the retreat initially thinking that this stuff was a bunch of malarkey. No one could live it out. So my intention was for Jack to take me over to Clarence and Grace's, and I would see how many buttons I could push. Really, seriously, because I wanted to see if this was authentic and if it worked. And in their marriage, as opposite that they were, they had what I now call God glue. God glue that held the marriage together. And they could celebrate their differences and yet have respect for one another. And God has blessed me with a man who seeks after God's heart. Now, Do I wish he would put down the toilet lid? Yes. You know, are there these little things, and I do call them little things, even though I can make big things out of it. I choose and try not to. But the important thing is to know that God, too, has ordained our relationships. Whether you're leaders of a retreat, but if you are in a committed situation and in marriage, you are a partner. You're going to be a partnership. And this has always been a learning experience for me. Growth is what I choose to call it, whether I want it or not. But it's all been good, and God is in the center of it. And if you need to know anything about God glue, come see us.
Now, the other side of the story. You know, what BJ said about Clarence and Grace is absolutely true. Amazing. You know, Clarence would point his finger at me and shake his head. And Grace would say, I love you, darling. Depending on what you needed, you knew who to call. But that's how they lived their lives, and it was wonderful. Now, the reason I picked the microphone up this time, there are two couples here sitting in front of you right now who probably wouldn't be couples here right now if it hadn't have been for Clarence and Grace. I mean that. I'm speaking for Steve and Sue, but I know Steve's story and Sue's. I certainly know ours. And it was the example that they set, the encouragement that they gave us, the incentive to change, to hang in there and stick it out, to do the next right thing, all those things that you hear, that's what we learned from Clarence and Grace. These retreats were just kind of a sideboard of life, really, because that's how they live their lives. Sure, these retreats were important, but just to watch them every day, what an example they've been for us. Foreman.
We're going to have a fight right here over who goes first.
Looks like we lost.
We are certified incompatible. We have papers to prove that we are the most competitive and incompatible couple that one of the largest marriage and family therapist groups in the Southeast had ever counseled with. That was, of course, about 8 years before Steve decided to come to AA in '79. So we were divorcing in 71 and 72 and 73 and 74. We started doing the retreats in '84, and we were still incompatible. And AA didn't really help us. Because I'm going to be truthful, it did not help. As a matter of fact, the only thing that probably helped me was Clarence. Because although a good friend, Dick and Frances Ann, went through the steps at the same time. Frances and Ann and I were our own little Al-Anon. We were reading all the literature. We didn't go to meetings, but we read everything. We had books and books and books. And we prayed with each other all the time. But of course, Dick and Steve didn't know that. So when he ended up going to the retreat and came home, I must interject right here. When he came in the house, through the garage door into the main room that was in the house we lived in at the time, I had, 15 or 18 years of promises, and I knew full well that every time he said, I'm not going to drink, that it meant nothing, because he was always going to say that while he was leaning against the corner of a wall trying to hold himself up. And the next morning was the same, so I had no expectations. But when he walked in, he had a glow. I didn't even know where he'd been. He hadn't even told me anything about Clarence and Grace. But he was different the minute I saw him. So the program and Jesus Christ saved our marriage. And it wouldn't have mattered what Clarence and Grace said. But right about that time, Dick and Steve decided Francis Ann and I needed to be saved. Because whatever we had done wasn't good enough. So they trucked us over to Clarence. And Clarence did not take me through the steps in the classic way. He asked me what steps I had experienced to that point. And to me, that was a level of respect that I was not getting from the newbie. I thought that back on it because someone asked me about it, and it suddenly occurred to me, well, because of the conversations we're having. How did you experience the steps the first time? The first time I experienced them with Clarence Snyder, who asked me how I had, not do you want to, how have you already experienced the steps? So he confirmed that what I had done when I admitted I was powerless was perfectly fine. And what I had done when I decided I would believe, just as an experiment, was perfectly fine. And he took me to the point where I was ready to want to know more and picked me up there. And that was a different kind of story, but I think at this point I'm moved to tell you because it is different than we're talking about how to do the steps. What kind of respect do we have for the people that we bring for where they are starting? And he confirmed what I had done in the past tense, instead of saying, well, you've got to do this again because surely it wasn't right the first time you did it. So your question really is about the relationship, and what I want to say is we were both saved and doing well, and we were still raving, incompatible. The marriage was horse hockey. We were raging 2-year-olds trying to get our needs met. But the thing, of course, that kept us together, well, it wasn't a couple that prays together, stays together, because every time we tried to pray together, we took it as an insult. So we're going to do this nice prayer, oh Lord, give me patience. Well, what does he need patience for? Everything that, even though he had glowed at that moment, he was still using prayer to manipulate me. I never got the feeling that he would. And then Grace tells me, oh, I have to be submissive and all that. I never bought that. I never bought it yet. I love Grace. She was absolutely a saint. I never bought that part of her story. And, you know, someday I will meet Jesus face to face and he'll say, you probably should have bought that story. But so far it has not been revealed to me. I might stop there if I can have dibs while I collect my thoughts.
Thank you for sharing.
I want to do the good part later.
She still does not put the toilet seat up. Cannot get her trained to put the toilet seat up. So we had issues. We have issues. They go on. They've gone on this weekend. They'll go on as long as we're together. But we're powerful together, and we get a lot done because we have different talents. They just, in the old adage, iron sharpens iron. Maybe we're getting sharper as we grow. And then maybe we're not. You know, I could be wrong again. But we are making progress, and we've done it through hard work. Many of you have heard our story about the Harville Hendricks experience and the Imago relationship therapy, and And that had a big bearing on our ability to at least communicate instead of slamming doors and throwing swords and spears and whatever. So we've gone to a lot of work. This is work. It's not the most pleasant experience to continue to grow together, but we survive, and our talents are supplemental to a certain degree. It would be impossible for me to work in the same office with Sue. It would be impossible for her to work in the same office with me, so we don't do that. And you could just go down the list of differences that exist, but if you have a goal line, then we've made the goal line. We have family that's together.
You missed the joy part, didn't you?
Well, I was getting to that.
Oh, I have to add the tagline, which is that we have a shared vision that's really bigger than either of us. Shame on you for starting something.
All my fault.
It's his fault. So we started, we had to do the retreats in '84. We would fight all the way to this building and fight all the way home. Mary Jo Robinson used to ride with us, and she'd ride in the back, and her eyes would go, she'd never seen anything quite like it. But as soon as we walked in here, whoa, yeah, it was so fun. It was so fun. We were praying individually. I think one of PJ's, one of the things she told me what she really enjoyed was this triangle about marriage. And that I'm over here and Steve's over there, and we are desperately trying to find a place where we can be connected and close and be independent individuals. And he would then pursue me on a certain level, and I'd pursue him on a different track, and we were on different tracks in this pursuit. And we'd show up trying to explain, well, he's always doing this, and he's doing that, and I'm feeling we have the same stories because I'm pursuing him, and he's running on one track, and he's pursuing me, and I'm running on another track, and we can never find the place where we feel connected. And the triangle for us was that the top of that is God. And if we could just let this go for a minute and then focus up here individually, and that my progress was not dependent on his, and his was not dependent on mine. And the closer that we could get to some spiritual maturity, the closer we could feel to one another, because we would be closer. But you have to talk to the microphone like this, because if you do that, you can't hear me. So that was the little triangle thing that was very helpful for us in the 80s. And then we hit in '89 the Imago dialogue, where we finally got to the point of understanding that we had picked each other, because indeed we are each like as children. We had parents that did not meet our needs in critical ways, and we picked a partner who was just like that person, so that eventually we could grow up. And that's the way God planned it. Because you cleave one to another, and some people can divorce. Well, why do people divorce? That's Matthew something. And although we're not supposed to put numbers on it.
That's
right?
right.
No numbers, no chapter verse, no location. And yes, you should. You can divorce your wife because you are so hard to teach. And the teaching is an emotional teaching that we have now been able to help each other do. We've grown and we've healed each other through this dialogue process. And the glue that has kept us together is this vision of somehow carrying a message that will help other people.
Carol?
Okay, I want to tell you how the retreats helped our marriage. My husband went into AA, oh man, on New Year's Eve of 1963. And I went into Al-Anon. I went to Al-Anon the same night. There I was welcomed by those wonderful people. And after 8 or 9 years of very rough, active alcoholism on his part, and rough trying to live with it or fix it or whatever, support, or take his responsibility of those very things, those people accepted me. They didn't think I was crazy. They didn't think he was bad. They accepted us. It was really beautiful. And all the disillusionment I felt when he went to drinking after I married this wonderful man, he went to drinking, all that disillusionment disappeared and all the hope came. But then for the next 14 years, it kind of got to be that he was on a dry drunk most of the time. He worked his program. He was wonderful. He helped people in the program. The people in Al-Anon and I were close. We helped each other. But my husband and I grew farther apart and more tense. And I read articles. I did everything I could to make it work. I tried to find the togetherness. And for 14 years, he backed away. And I just got more broken and more broken. And about the time that he got ready to go to his first retreat, which was miraculous. He'd had the flu and he didn't get over it. He had a syndrome of some kind, and the doctor said a trip would be good for him. And so he took the trip to the retreat. And while he was at the retreat, this thing I said about finding people that would really explain God as they understood him, he came back different. He came back searching. He looked in the Bible. He looked in the big book. Early on, those 14 years, I did not belong in his AA program. I belonged over in my Al-Anon program, and this was separate. Well, I turned my life over. I had always lived Christian. I believed everything. I read the Bible, but I got him. And I just had to tell the Lord, all I've been doing, trying to find the answers, isn't working. I need you to take over my life. And we had done this about the same time. And it was so wonderful because even though all the hurt was still there and I couldn't see where it was going to go, other things opened up to me. Here, I'd never been able to take my 5th step because I couldn't admit I was so rotten. And all of a sudden here was a God that loved me just like I was, and I got the courage to take my 4th and 5th step. And I got the courage to let go of him and say, Lord, whatever you have for him, it's okay, whatever you have for me. If our marriage isn't going to go, it's all right. Whatever you have for us is okay. And I learned to let go, and I learned to say things like, well, I may not agree with you, but it's your decision and you're going to have to live with it. Well, wonderful things happened, things I never dreamed of. He started saying, you know, and Al-Anon, you seem to figure out a lot of things in relationships that our guys never seem to get. How do you do this? And so he started talking to me about the Al-Anon principles. And even sometimes he would get me together with someone he thought needed that message. And so we were closer and closer and growing. And since we had both got the Lord in our life, we were living by more and more Christian principles and trusting God and happy with each other because for trusting God and growing in the program and in our Christian life. And later on, he got cancer, and he suffered with cancer for 8 years. And I was able to be there for him and be a support, and so glad that I could be. And when he was ready to end his life, I knew he was going home to the Lord. I sang him to sleep when he went. And I just said, hey, you're with Jesus. And it was such a wonderful thing that after all those years of tension, those early years, I didn't know he would be with Jesus. And didn't know I would be with Jesus. But here we had these kids that knew he was with Jesus. They had received the Lord, most of them. Our life was very, very changed. And the tools, I could have had faith, but not had the tools for letting go, the tools for how to go forward when I had let go. And it wouldn't have been nearly as easy. But because of Al-Anon going along with my faith, and the retreats were responsible for it. He would, we couldn't have gotten together like that, but we did, and so, thanks.
May I speak on a marriage that failed?
Sure.
I came in here, when I came in to Alcoholics Anonymous in the fall of 1972, I was married. And I was married to a big, gentle, loving, kind man who tried to help me in every way he could. I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I just knew I couldn't stop drinking. And he bought me a little dog to distract me, my little poodle Susie. And that didn't help. I was still drinking. And then he bought me a fish tank. And he said, now you just sit there and watch these fish. And they are nice. They will calm you down. And so the fish tank didn't help. Nothing really helped until I was telling you about. I went to Howard's Bar with some teachers on Friday night and helped Ruby home to her bed, and a voice spoke to me and said, "There but for the grace of God are you." And I was instantly sober, and I never drank again. That was the fall, December the 7th, 1972. It was a miracle. And so my life from that moment was a bumpy ride. It was just like this. And I went to the hospital with a stroke, but I never drank again. And so I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And my husband was glad that I was sober, but he was kind of jealous because he had tried everything he could, and it didn't work what he did, but AA worked. And the Lord works. The voice of the Lord came to me. Anyway, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and after a while, he was convinced that I had a good thing there, but he was very wary about it, and he did go to Al-Anon. And this was around the corner from my AA meeting. I live in Linthicum, Maryland. That's near Baltimore, so I say Baltimore. But around the corner was Al-Anon. And so he would go to Al-Anon, and I would go to AA. My first anniversary came up, and he was the one to come and give me my chip. And he got in the microphone and he said, "Well, here is her first year chip." And he said, "But I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop."
Oh.
And I was very unhappy about that. So time goes on, and I get a second anniversary. And he gives me my chip. He's waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so the shoe didn't drop for the third anniversary, the fourth anniversary, the fifth, the sixth anniversary. He gave me my chip, and he got up there and he said, "Well, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." And I took the chip and I said, "It's gonna drop on you." And so we went home, and we were very unhappy, and things just drifted apart. And finally I was asked for a divorce, and I got a divorce. And it seemed like he had met a lady in Al-Anon that he thought was pretty good. And so I got divorced, but I got a terrible resentment about Al-Anon. I thought, those people stole my husband. Not honest, my drinking did it. But anyway, that's the way I was at the time. And I came into AA, I was very immature. Very immature. I'd cry over things that shouldn't even cry over and think people were talking about me. And I was very needy and very codependent on almost anybody that wanted to be a friend with me. I'd latch on to them and they couldn't get away. So I had all of these character defects, many character defects, but I had a wonderful, wonderful sponsor. Sponsors are so important, so important. And this woman, she was from Akron, Ohio. I think she had memorized the big book. And she told me, she said, I'm a 12-step sponsor, and you are my, they called them pigeons then. They didn't call them sponsees. And somebody asked me, why do they call them pigeons? Did they call them pigeons back in the old days? I said, because pigeons poop on everything. That's why they called us pigeons. Now, you couldn't do that in today's huggy-kissy society. You have to hug them and kiss them and think they're wonderful while they're pooping on you. So, anyway, that's an old-timer talk. However, I got my 7th and 8th and 9th one. And just recently, at this retreat, I got my 42nd chip. Never married again. I matured. I grew up. I had to grow up. You have to grow up in AA. But I figure I'm a success. I'm still single. I'm looking for a healthy 90-year-old man that likes to go to shows and dance.
Okay, let's talk about one more question here. One of the things we've talked about today is the responsibility of reaching out to the newcomer, to following up with the returnees, of investing in these people. And so I'm curious as to, are each of you living that example out? Are you mentoring people, discipling people? Are there people in your life that you're actively seeking to invest in?
Hi, I'm still BJ. I'd give myself a D-. I do sponsor people. I actually happen to meet them at other retreat. It's more or less a phone conversation. And so that is what I do. I carry the message and the invitation to my Al-Anon meetings and to my Al-Anon sponsees. But I seem to be unsuccessful as to in my sales job. So I'm going to fess up, guys. I've done a terrible job in staying in touch with you and supporting you and affirming you. And I apologize. And I'm going to do better. Thank you.
You know, I've sponsored a few people, not many. People have asked me to be a sponsor many times, and I kind of tell them how it is. I'm not a good sponsor, but I do invest in people's lives. And I do really care, and I do want to see them grow, and I want to see them develop. And I really enjoy working at the Recovery Center for that reason. But I'm not the person to call when you're in trouble, it seems like. I've never been that guy. I traveled a great deal when I was working. It seemed like I was never available, and I use that as an excuse, perhaps. not to make the investment or take the time to sponsor men, sponsor people. But there are people that have been in my orbit that if you ask them today, have their lives changed as a result of came to believe? Have their lives changed as a result of going through these steps, of having taken them through the steps? By the way, I do take lots of people through the steps. Don't sponsor them. But boy, I'll tell you what, I've taken 1,000 people through their steps probably. And that is where I feel I have the most to offer, and I can see lives change. I don't change lives, the steps do. Why do the steps change lives? Because they meet the change your. And that, to me, is what it's all about. Thank you, guys.
On Monday, at noontime, I go to my home meeting, Out of the Ashes, and on Wednesday at noontime, I've been the secretary of 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. And each Wednesday we do a different step, and on the third Wednesday we do the tradition of the month. And I've been doing this particular meeting for many, many years. As a matter of fact, I've always gone to AA since the Lord called me. 12 Steps and 12 Traditions is a extremely maturing program. And anyone who wants to start an AA program, I urge you to start 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, because the newcomer comes in, and when he say, even if he's has court slips, they come in with court slips and listen to each step being read and discussed. We read it and discuss it, and they get an idea of what the program is. That's how I did. That's the first thing that my sponsor had me do, was go to a 12-step meeting. And she said this, she said, when they call on you, you say, my name is Liz, I'm an alcoholic, and I pass. And I said, well, why do I pass? I said, I've got some opinions too about this. And she said, we don't want your opinion. We like the step just as it is. So anyway, so much for the trial. I don't tell the people nowadays that wouldn't go over too well in today's generation, but at any rate. Then on Friday, at Friday night, another girl and I sponsor newcomers to a particular recovery home. It's called the Way Home in Pasadena, Maryland, and it's a wonderful place. We have at that home a big book meeting. So let's see, I guess about 25 years ago, I took the big book and divided it up into sections, 50 sections, and so we do a section a week and go through the year of the big book. And anyone who wants that particular program, I can mail it to them. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful program, and you get to talk about God all the time. All the time. Because God is in the big book.
Yep.
And as a matter of fact, it only mentions higher power twice. But God is how many times in the big book?
122 times in the first 164 pages.
122 times. And so you get to talk all about God, because here it is in the big book. And I can talk about my God anytime I want. His name is Jesus C. He's anonymous, and that kind of thing. And I do. So I urge you, if you want to carry the message, get on either one of these, start either one of these programs, and you'll have more sponsees than you can manage. I have probably hundreds of old sponsees that have gone through the steps, and they're friends now. At the present time, I'm sponsoring 4. so.
Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol. Carol Morfitt Welch, Grateful Al-Anon. And I'm kind of joining BJ in the grade average. But I'm privileged to help with the fall retreat. I'm privileged to go to Al-Anon when I'm in Amory in Wisconsin. I'm not going to it so much down here. The only meeting I know of conflicts with something else I have. But I'm really praying. And one of the problems and obstacle that I have is that our group only allows conference-approved literature. They don't even let us announce the retreat at our meetings. But I do on the side tell people about them. I wish that we had an Al-Anon that wasn't growing more and more secular. I'm trying to think of another way to reach people who need Al-Anon that wouldn't leave Jesus out. I'm praying about it.
Thank you. Sue?
Thanks, Carol.
Sue's up. Steve, oh, sorry, I didn't see Steve had it.
Oh, I'm here, yeah.
Bye.
Steve, there are a lot of courses that I would grade myself on. If somebody said, how are you going to meetings? I would get an F. Just a not meeting goer. So I get an F for going to meetings. Somebody would say, well, how are you in sponsoring? Well, maybe a C minus, sponsor maybe 5 people, but it's not, gee, let me call A, B, C, D, and E today or this week or whatever. It's a very casual, probably unfortunate for all of us who think that I'm sponsoring them, relationship, because it's just, these folks are not needy. I'm not a personality who can.
No, that's great. That's a great phrase. I'm going to remember it.
Should be next. So I don't do the needy group very well, but these people are not needy. They're absolutely top of the line. Many of them, several are here. So would I give, I get a C minus on that. Time involved, I would probably get an A, because if I describe for you the time involved, that would be, we mail out 100 to 200 AA legacy books every week. I respond to 10 to 30 emails a week. Phone calls that come in, I got this issue with step 4, tell me why, how did this go, what did Clarence say, what do you do, how's this retreat, where are you going, what's this, where are you going to be, rah, rah, rah. So, and Mrs. Foreman knows how I love to get phone calls at home. It's not a course in good language, I'm going to assure you. So I used to do that, but after the day, and I'm on the phone a lot and everything, and I just say, I've had enough. It's time out. And so put in time, and then we go to retreats, as you all know. So if you want to take, who puts in a lot of hours, okay, I'll get an A, probably in hours. And so the different segments of my AA program, I'm going to get a differing grade. Since I'm in the grading business, I would give Sue an absolute A+ in website, the work that's been done on this retreat, the work that's done on every retreat. I mean, her time is greatly involved in this, and I'm not speaking for her, I'm just saying that my outside opinion of her involvement as an Al-Anon member is she's a big and just an absolute must in terms of the teamwork. I'm going to take issue with BJ on her C-. BJ really put together the majority of the early on material for our legacy guide, because she took the time to lay out this outline, and she took the time to piece all that together between Jack's notes and my notes and so on. So I'm going to elevate her grade since I'm, giving out grades. Jack's an A. I mean, he just across the board A. He goes over that retreat center, going through the steps. I bet he goes to 10 retreats a year. Again, I'm segmentizing Jack's grades. Maybe I don't know how many sponsors, it doesn't really matter, but he's out there stirring them every single day. This guy's stirring it. So we are a team. Sue and I are a team, even though we're have different jerseys on. We just don't play on the same team every day, but we're in the game. We're scoring. So that's our function. I mean, we are a match, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the end result, a la this weekend, is generally excellent. But buddy, it's an uphill battle. Buddies, it's hard work, but we're hanging in there.
Sue's got something to say.
Oh, I don't know that I do.
What was the question? I think I nodded off.
How about them gators?
How are you doing on discipling, mentoring, investing in other people?
If we were to use the analogy of a saw, and with those who are on the front line actually hitting the wood, I consider myself 3-in-1 oil.
What?
Explain what that was again.
Oil,
Oh, no, if you were a
saw,
saw.
as in not seesaw,
Saw.
I saw
I got
a
it now.
chainsaw. If we were a chainsaw massacre team, and we are looking for people to fix, and who's on the front lines, I might be the maintenance crew, chainsaw, and I might be just the oil. I'm not the power, I'm not the blade, I'm not the motor. But I see myself as trying to slick it just a little.
Keep it all moving.
Jack, did you have one more thing you wanted to?
Yeah, I do. Steve was talking about the team, and God's looking for a man who's willing and game ready. So be ready when God calls, and you won't need to get ready. Being ready is a mindset. If I'm waiting for God's call on the mountaintop, I'll miss His call to serve Him in the valley. God needs recovered addicts who are willing to do whatever, whenever. You always need to be ready to minister to the least of these, to take care of the widows and orphans and feed His sheep, to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. You're not lacking, unworthy, hopeless, worthless, or useless. Devil is forever at work telling us we're not ready. He wants nothing more than to destroy God's game plan. Don't listen to his lie. This is warfare, and the battles are real, and we need to be ready with our armor in place. So we step and we read Ephesians. Be game ready. This is no place for second team players. You're on the first team, that's why God called you. Be ready at all times to run with the ball when your play is called. It may be the game-running touchdown, or just better field position, and somebody else kicks the winning field goal. Your job is to be in top shape, practiced up, be ready to play your best. When you step up to the plate and you do, God takes over and hits a home run. God is the power source. He supplies the whatever, the power and the faith. God always enters the game at just the right time, the whenever. And God never changes his game plan. So be ready and you won't have to get ready.
Very good, Jack.
All right, so I just want to, we're going to finish up. I've kept you guys under the gun for an hour, a little over an hour.
It's like forever.
But
Feels
I
like
wanna-
forever.
What's that?
Feels like forever.
I would give you guys all a better grade than you would give yourselves. In the last 3 months, I've gotten to know each of you and in different ways at different times. And for any of you that haven't had that chance, you may curse me for this later, but take the time, get to know these people. If you haven't thought about how rare it is, this weekend we are participating in history. How many organizations do you get to sit with a legacy group of people and talk about the past and the future and be a part of history like that? I don't think it is their job to chase us. It is our job to seek out that friendship with them. Steve and I had this conversation on the phone, and he said he was poor at it, that perhaps he was failing. And I don't think that at all, because through this, Steve called me a lot, and I'm bound and determined to just pester him until we're friends. These people have what we want. And the grace with which they move through their lives is amazing to be a part of. So take the time. There will come a day when we won't have that opportunity, when we'll have to have these meetings for another generation. And there's no better time to learn from them than while they're here now. These people, every single one of them, participate in multiplication. They may not be investing in one-on-one, but through these retreats, through the treatment centers, through the other things they do, they are making disciples that make disciples. And that's where it's at. So thank you guys for your investiture and your time and your friendship.